Before you begin this week's lesson, I want you to look at something we learned last week and even some weeks before that. We've previously learned that in order to add, subtract, or compare fractions, you must have a common denominator. The denominator, the number on the bottom, must be the same in order to 100% accurate know your answer. And so far, all the problems that you've been given all have that common denominator. So I want to look at a couple of examples. 1/4 plus 1/4 equals 2/4. The bottom number, the denominator, is telling us the whole has that many pieces all together. So it's the difference of getting a pizza cut in 6 pieces or 10 pieces that tells you the denominator. So for this one, we know that our whole is cut into fourths, and you see them here. And I'm adding 1/4, so I've shaded 1/4. And I'm adding another fourth, shaded it. So all together, I have 2 of the 4 shaded. So my answer is 2/4. It is not 2/8. I don't add the numerator and the denominator. I only add the numerator. The pieces are the same size. Now, one thing that's pretty cool here is that I can see here the visual that 2/4 is the same thing as 1/2. So I'm going to add that in because you can clearly see that. Now, the next one, we're looking at a whole, kind of looks like a candy bar, where the piece size are fifths. So I have this whole cut into fifths. And if I'm going to add 2/5 and 1/5, I've shaded in 2/5, and then I've come along and I'm adding one more fifth. So again, my piece size stays the same, but I've added the numerator and I have 3/5. So when I add 2/5 and one more fifth, I have 3/5. And the last example, we've cut our whole into piece sizes of 8. So these are eighths in this circle. And the problem is to add 1/8 plus 1/8. So I've shaded in 1/8 and then another 8, and I get 2/8 are shaded in. Now, just like this one, where I could clearly see that this is 1/2, I can also see right here that this is clearly 1/4 of the pie. So I could change this answer into 1/4. That means that 2/8 is the same thing as 1/4. Now, these are some things that you've just done in the last few weeks. This week, your opportunity of learning is going to be with fractions that don't have the same denominator. So let's look at that. If you don't have the same denominator, then you're going to have to get that in some form or fashion. You get that either by finding the least common multiple or the least common denominator. That's how we find a common denominator. And the process is a pretty simple one. We have our two fractions, 1/4 and 1/5. So we need to find the least common multiple. So I'm going to list the multiples out beside it. The multiples of 4, 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. Now we could go on, but I know that it's somewhere up in here. And then I'm going to list the multiples of 5. 5, 10, 15, 20. Oops, I already see that I have a 20 in each one. So I know that my new denominator is going to be 20. And I have to do, everything is kind of like a balancing scale. What I do to one, I have to do the other. So if I'm looking at this fraction, to get in my multiple, 4 times what gives me 20? Well, I know your brain's thinking really quickly, and it's 4 times 5 to get me 20. If I do that here, I must do it to the numerator. So 4 times 5, so 1 times 5, and my numerator becomes 5. So I have 5/20ths, and I'm going to do the same thing down here. 5 times what will give me 20? Well, right away I'm thinking, and I know you know it in your brain, it's 5 times 4. So if I do it to the bottom, I must do it to the top. 1 times 4. So that numerator becomes 4. Now I have a common denominator. My denominator is 20. I keep that, and I add the numerator. 5 plus 4 is 9/20ths. Again, we have found the least common multiple, and we have converted to have a new fraction that means the same thing. Just like, I'll show you down here, just like 2/4 equals 1/2 and 2/8 equals 1/4, I know that 1/5 equals 4/20ths, 1/4 equals 5/20ths. So let's look at another example. Again, I cannot add these 2/3 plus 1/5 because they don't have a common denominator. That was the rule we knew. So I'm going to begin to list. Generally speaking, when I'm doing this in my brain, I like to start with the largest number to count up, because once I see it in my lower number, I know I've arrived. So I'm going to do my multiples of 5. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. I could keep going, but I'm going to stop and hope that I don't have to list so many. You usually don't. And then I'm going to come here to the thirds and list my 3. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Whoops, I can already see right here. That's going to become my least common multiple, my least common denominator. So I'm going to come right here, and my new denominator is going to be 15ths. So remember that balancing act. If I'm changing the denominator, I must change the numerator. 5 times what? It gives me 15. 3. You knew it. And 1 times 3 gives me 3. So I know that 1/5 is the same thing as 3/15ths. And down here, 3 times 5 is 15, so I must do it at the numerator. 2 times 5 is 10. So now I have a common denominator that's going to stay the same in my answer. It's going to be a 15th. And I'm going to add my numerator. 3 plus 10, 13 becomes my answer. The first part of the lesson this week, all I'm going to ask you to do is list some multiples and then tell me which one is the least common multiple. And then I'm going to do another little video doing some more problems like this, and then I'll ask you to be solving some of these problems, adding and subtracting where we do not have a common denominator. But you can see how easy it is, and if you're not sure, stop this, pause it, and review it again.